Well, welcome back, Mick. Glad to see you made it through Pat's engagement party unscathed.
Yeah, just. Nah, just kidding. I actually did keep it pretty quiet, actually. I've got that run in my mind. I'm about 4 days, 5 days out from 23 Ks of hills along the coastline. So
Ouch.
quite on the beers, but definitely didn't quiet down on watching the races at the pub on Saturday. It was another fantastic week of racing, plenty of stories coming out of it, and then Sunday as well was quite special for the Aussie UFC fans.
It was a huge weekend of sports, hey. Personally, all of us Queensland locals were absolutely cheering that Antino was able to get it done in the Hollandale.
Yeah, absolutely. It's geez, how about the conditions in that race? I
Oh.
could not believe what I was seeing, and
When they did a track inspection just before, I was like, this poor turf club. Like the Gold Coast has just been cursed these last couple of years.
yeah, absolutely, and it got cut up, and that's what suited Antino. It's a special relationship that Blake Shinn and Antino are building, and I think that's proven itself through the headlines this week. Is Blake had to deal with a riding suspension, and he's made a pretty big call.
Yeah, he has. Hey, sticking with him over Schwartz. Huge call, but loyalty certainly pays off under these circumstances. And Mick, from your perspective, I know we've had a bit of back and forth over the weekend. What would you do? What would I do? Where would you land? Doomben 10,000 or Doomben Cup? Where would you take a ride?
Yeah, well, I think, as many expected, including myself, Shin's obviously opted to stay with Antino. I think, fresh off the Hollandale, it was a massive win. He looks to be in super form. And I think I was looking at, I think trainer Tony Gollan's going to be pretty thrilled himself because I reckon Blake Shinn's missed a couple of rides on Antino due to suspension in the past. So,
Yeah.
I think one man that's going to be very happy is Tony Gollan to get Blake Shinn aboard. But despite everything, Schwartz is coming off a career best Group One win in the William Reid. Jamie Mott obviously did ride that time. Blake wasn't on board, but I think Blake's skill speaks volumes when he gets so many good rides in these Group One races and interstate. He's obviously a Victorian jockey, but he kind of picks and chooses right up and down the East Coast. So, in terms of selection, Antino's versatility, it's proven wet track, and when it comes to the capacity to stay on in a preparation, I think, looking towards the spring, as those good jockeys do, I think Antino looks a better prospect than Schwartz. No disrespect to Schwartz, but I think when it comes to those sprint races, it's a bit more. There's a lot more contenders in the races. I think Antino's right at the top of those middle distance stars. And, races like the Champions Mile at the back end of the Flemington Carnival or even the Cox Plate look to be in Tony Gollan's sight. So I think Blake Shinn's made the right call. But, if you're to scrap back all that and take away, all those factors, I guess I can ask you, you're up in Queensland, the feel behind these big upcoming races, the 10,000 and the Cup. What are you picking as a jockey? What do you want on your resume? Is it the 10,000 or are you staying the week after and doing the Cup?
For a resume, I suppose both of these races were inaugurated in the same year. So you can't really say that one has more prestige than the other. So like a typical jockey would, I put on my helmet and I thought about all the cash that's going in my pocket. And I can think Doomben 10,000, that extra $500,000. And of course, this race is a key lead up as we head towards the Stradbroke, the sprint races during the spring even. We saw Bella Nipotina won the Doomben 10,000 last year, went on to win an Everest. So for me, I'd prefer a Doomben 10,000 just for the sake of that association and the relationship with these horses and trainers. But that is exactly what Blake Shinn opted to do by sticking with Antino in the Doomben Cup. Like you were saying, Schwartz retires at the end of this season. Antino has the best of his racing career ahead of him. So I think Blake Shinn thought very, very correctly by choosing the Doomben Cup with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, you know, he's already starting to do the rain dance, I reckon, Tony Gollan, heading into the spring here in Melbourne. It's been a very, very dry year so far. Just ask the farmers in Victoria, they'll tell you it's been very dry. So
All buggers.
there might be a lot of rain coming come springtime. So, and if that rain falls, Antino's stocks just continue to rise. And I think he's made a good call there.
Most definitely. Now, speaking of all of you down in Victoria, had a huge weekend with Caulfield. Tell me about your top two runners from the day.
Yeah, well, I think there were standout performances right across the card. I think the flashy debut from Prince Tycoon, the well-named son of Prince Ty written Tycoon, I should say. I don't know about you. I think that's a pretty cool name for a horse up and coming, Prince Tycoon.
It is. I love a good play on words too, and particularly with that ownership group, First Light Racing, they love to have those flag bearers, a name you can cheer home. So Prince Tycoon was a huge run, and I'm thrilled to see him coming up here next weekend for the Magic Millions 2-year-old national race. $1 million in prize money. Last night racing at the Gold Coast. I think it's going to be a huge race.
Yeah, he's got that striking white face and those white socks. He just looks a picture, and it took a while for him to really kind of get into his groove. I think once Buckets Daniel Moore straightened the young gelding up and really got into his work. He showed that turn of foot that he showed in a lot of his trials, and it's the sharpness that they were speaking about before the race. It's a big thrill for Trent and Natalie to have another 2-year-old star coming through the ranks, but also for John Salinitri, who did a lot of work with this horse before it moved to the Busset and Young Yard, and must be great for him to see that too. And being a gelding already, I think they can be really patient with this horse. And but in saying that, they've already decided to make the move up, the Magic Millions National Classic on the Gold Coast, worth a cool million, and it looms as the logical next step. Clearly, I think that the way that he accelerated in that last furlong was, geez, it showed me plenty, and I'd be absolutely
Yeah.
stoked to be taking that horse up to $1 million race up in Queensland.
Most definitely. You could even see, I was a bit nervous. I don't know about you. He sort of came off the bridle coming around the bend, and, Daniel Moore had to really work into him to pick him back up. And thank goodness he did. He's a horse that's still so green, has so much improvement to come. So I'm very excited to see him as he progresses. Now, the patience that the Hayes brothers had with Medaya has paid off in dividends. How good was that run?
Oh, absolutely. I think, if Prince Tycoon wasn't the one that caught your eye, it was definitely Medaya. Beautifully prepared horse. A filly who has taken time. I think it shows as well. As you said, the Hayes team, they continue to impress year round right across the country, and it's their patience and planning that really, really shows off. And they're allowing these late maturers like Medaya to bypass some of the big autumn races for those fillies, just to allow for that extra maturation. And now the doors have opened up north for some potential races. But I've just heard today from Will Hayes that they've decided to just be patient once again. So I think if anything, that says a lot about their thoughts and opinions about this filly. She's obviously super impressive, but I think the plan is to have one more run down here in Melbourne and then possibly think about going into state. But I wouldn't be surprised if they put her away and really start to look towards the Spring Carnival. But, the Group 3 Fred Best was the race that they were thinking of taking Medaya to, which is on March 31. But yeah, she's clearly got so much upside. And, as an owner, I'd be stoked to hear that news. They're going to do one more run down here and then put her away and really look towards some big prize money races in the spring. But yeah, she's a talent, and I can't wait to see her again. And flashbacks of Zaydani. I loved Zaydani as a horse. Same silks, same stud. Just such a great ownership group, and I got flashbacks of Zaydani, which is a horse that I absolutely loved.
I love it. Definitely plenty of upside with her. And I am glad to hear that they're staying on for the spring. I'm sure the owners will be very happy with that. And, with those lightly framed fillies and mares, you do need to take your time with them, make sure they stick with the feed. I read that, she's a mare that can struggle with that at times. So definitely best call, let her furnish and bring her back out. But my disappointment or bone to pick from the weekend. First Settler has retired. Another one of our 3-year-old boys set off to stud. Mick, I know we've had plenty of conversations about this in the past, about how is this going to affect our game? Does this, do we lose interest in these sorts of storylines? And how does that actually affect us in the long run?
Well, yeah, the first thing I read is that First Settler's going to stand alongside Growing Empire. So,
Yeah.
to lose two guns like that, horses that ran against each other in the Poseidon Stakes and both looked to be super talented. I remember watching that race and just going, you long. Absolutely cheeky, but I think it's a
I know.
reflection of these big industry players who they work this ever-growing cycle, and it's, buy the best looking and the best bred yearlings, who are then delivered to the best trainers, also known as your likes of Chris Waller, and the Freedmans, and the best development systems to be, to have these 2-year-olds once they're two, I should say, to be cherry ripe, and they start winning races like the Poseidon, the Previews, the Preludes, Diamonds, Slippers. They run in those races, whether they win or not. I think they show enough, and they acquire that black type, and then it's the best financial decision. Remember that Yulong is a business. At the end of the day, it's the best financial decision to retire them and make even more money. So, is it just a part of this industry we're going to have to get used to, and just accept the fact that this is going to happen for quite some time now? I can't imagine that introducing some more 4-year-old races like the Golden Eagle are going to continue to attract these horses to stay on the track. But times change and things change. But that's a race that's always there's internationals coming over and running in them. So try to
Yeah.
stay on the track. They're running against horses who are incredible and from other parts of the world. So look, it to me it's a problem. Can I stop it? No. Can anyone stop it? No. But yeah, I'll be surprised if you had a different opinion to me and didn't think that, one, it's a problem, and two, it's something we can't stop.
Yeah, I'm with you. Unfortunately, breeding is the biggest business in this game. We can all tell ourselves that racing's the goal, but breeding is the end goal. It's sort of becomes an argument of chicken before the egg, really, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
it is a shame to see that so many of these colts, like you were saying, they don't stick on towards the golden eagle. That was pure in its inception for those 4-year-olds to target. So to now be dominated by the likes of those UK horses, it's a real conundrum for me, and I'm devastated that we can't solve it. It was reiterated to us when we were watching Liberty Island break down. She was the absolute jewel of Japan racing. And then to see her, I don't want to say pushed her, but she was tested to her limits on the international stage time and time
Mhm.
again. And now was a very valuable breeding prospect that was lost. And so I'm sure that that's what everyone looks at with their star colts is it's not worth a single nick on them
Yeah.
to run them. But it is devastating for our storylines. And really, for me, are we diluting the quality of racing by taking out these superstars early? Are our top horses truly our top horses when you take them away? It comes back to the Winx versus Black Caviar argument. You can't compare the two, but you wish you could.
Yeah, I guess on the flip side of that argument, if I'm to play devil's advocate, we're just hoping that, you know, the gold that comes out of these decisions is that, growing empire and first settler become stallions, generational stallions who, like your Zoostar and like your Written Tycoons, like your Schnitzels that, produce time after time again, these gun colts and fillies. So hopefully it's all worth it and they're injecting as many good yearlings and, obviously then 2-year-olds back into our system. And look, as I said, it's an ongoing cycle from a business perspective and from a talent perspective. But yeah, look, there's pros and cons, but what do you do? How are you going to sit there? How are you and I going to sit there and stop the millions in cash flow that Yulong are producing when they take these gun colts back to home and get them in the barn?
Yeah, exactly. Now, the breeding game had some more gossip. Obviously, the map was passed in the English chairman sale last Thursday, and the team are taking a bit of a pride of Jenny approach and are bringing her back to the tracks for us to see. I've not seen too much chatter about this, but for me, it's kind of controversial, this argument of, oh, we didn't sell, so we're going to bring them back. And, I'm sure that the team think they're making the right decision. She was up and about at the sales, completely wired. But when's enough and enough for these horses, and when are you just going to keep running them for the same result?
Yeah, look, it's again, is it that attraction, the financial attraction that maybe the map wasn't ready to retire, but maybe they thought that there was that based off recent form. The map hasn't been running up to scratch. Is a 3-time stakes winner and a Melbourne Cup runner as well. So has shown plenty in the past, and it's one of those horses the further got in distance, the better the map got. But yeah, it was some strange chatter about it, strange conversation about the fact that was passed in, and she looked like she still wanted to race. So, look, I think the best they can do now is they seem to have made a decision, but have a spell and kind of I think reassess that situation again. But I don't know if you could compare it too much to the Pride of Jenny situation where Pride of Jenny was breaking down and wasn't able to sustain that front runner style, that high pace, race after race as she got older. Whereas the map's kind of, it's been thereabouts in some pretty good races. But yeah, look, I think, the welfare of these horses is always in the best interest of the trainers and the owners. So, you just got to back the fact that they're going to make the right decision, and the map's going to be raring to go to race again if she is to put the saddle on again, and yeah, and hopefully can get another win. I think that'll prove everyone wrong.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see, what races they target next, whether they head for another Melbourne Cup tilt. She'll obviously miss out on the Andrew Ramsden next weekend, but there's still plenty of time for the Naturalism Herbert Power Geelong Cup if she wants to reiterate her last preparation. Now, Melbourne Cups aside, our next big spring race is the Everest. And I cannot believe we're already talking Everest Fields, but we have two runners secured, most recently Briasa. How exciting is this?
Oh, absolutely. I think look, you only have to listen to the Hawks team to really get a grip on how good they think this horse is. And there's a bit of chatter about did they go too early? Absolutely not for mine. I think Briasa showed plenty. I was a bit of a doubter of Briasa, especially stepping out to the 1400, which didn't quite work out. But the TJ Smith run was awesome, and I think that's the style of race that you need to bring to win an Everest. I think it's, we've seen horses come from the back in the past, but, these on-speed gallopers, especially, Briasa, if, they can draw a gate, it's going to look the winner, no doubt, from a
Yeah.
while out. And, but yeah, we've been talking about a special Car Ying Rising, potentially running in this race. And, if you're going off the data, I think, 3 bounds and the race is over with Car Ying Rising. So I think Car Ying Rising absolutely smashes every sprinter that's going to be in this race if they can get that horse out here healthy. So, it's exciting to start to see the race unfolding, the race shape. Obviously, Private Harry, the other one who's already got a slot, and what an excitement machine Private Harry is too. So, yeah, what are your thoughts? I think, is it too early?
I don't think so at all. I think half of the battle for these trainers is you spend a lot of your winter and then your early spring auditioning for the Everest. You're desperately trying to get a place. You're running your horses as often as you can to try and get the most impressive result to catch the eye of the slot holders. But to be able to take your time, now they can sit down, they can really plan backwards as to what's going to be the most advantageous for their horses. Do you keep them fresh? Do you start them early, run every 2 weeks? Get the distance into their legs. I think it's a very advantageous place to be. But in saying that, I don't know if I would want to be one of the slot holders. There's such a air of mystery with Kai Ying Rising coming out here. Obviously, he hasn't run against the world's best sprinters. He is the world's best sprinter, but what competition does he actually have in Hong Kong realistically? So to come out here, take on the likes of some of our best, I think it has a lot of slot holders nervous. Are they just getting horses if they don't get Kai Ying Rising? Are they just filling their slots for second? Or are they in with a real chance with some real value?
I think a race is a race. I think if, look, as I said, I do think Cayenne Rising absolutely smashes any field that is put in front of the horse. But at the same time, barriers win races, and, the barrier draw will be everything to bring other horses into the race. And I think, talking about the Everest, going off a little bit, but did Beedman on the weekend,
Oh my gosh,
like
huge
that
run.
has to be a horse that's got the Everest, a slot anyway. I think Newgate
Yeah,
do have their own slot. I
they
think
do,
they're going to be
yeah.
diving into a decision that early, especially with a horse that young and new to the scene. But wow,
I
that's a
know.
talent. I haven't seen a win like that in a
I
long time.
agree. I don't think the Gold Coast Turf Club's been blessed with a thrill like that for a long while, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think even, going back to what we were saying, a horse like Beedman, a younger horse where you'd want to keep them fresh, really well and sound, That would be so advantageous if they do secure a slot, sorry, for him early, and then can plan backwards and really just keep that horse completely bubble wrapped heading into the run.
Absolutely. Look, I did try to make a bit of a rough field, Briasa, Private Harry in. Let's assume Car Ying Rising, gets a run. I thought Beedman has definitely earned a bit of, based on that run on the weekend. I think I'll be shocked if Jimmy Star's not running. Jolie Star.
Yeah.
Headwall showed plenty this autumn. Autumn Glow, you might get one of those young fillies coming through and
Yeah.
run one of
Fill
those
the
sprint
Arrowfoot slot.
trips for some big prize money. And then you've got your timers like Sunshine in Paris. But one I was interested in, obviously the Coolmore and Godolphin slots. You know, did the youngsters, does Woden get a run? Does Stormboy come back to Australia and get a run? Um, Tempted one of the horses for Godolphin that might get a run as a youngster. So
I really liked the way that Tempted has been running through the autumn. I think it's a really handy horse, and I would love to see it, step up to that class with the Everest
yeah,
horses.
well, I think, Kaying Rising is obviously the standout favourite, but outside of that, it's an exciting race with, some up and coming sprinters who, they might not even be sprinters. They might just be, going to a race maybe fresh. But, like I said, horses like Autumn Glow, look, they're going to get out a lot further than the 1200. But even Lady Shenandoah's run over 1200 metres through the autumn was just mind blowing. They look like sprinters. So there's plenty of
Oh,
class
she's a
coming through, but
magnificent little
Kaying
thing.
Rising's the one to beat.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, all time, past or present, what would your ultimate Everest field be?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a good one. Look, Nature Strip gets in, absolutely no doubt, just because of the excitement machine. Red Zal went back to back, the first two. I think the best win I ever saw in an Everest was Classique Legend, so it gets a spot for
Yes.
me. Um, Giga Kick, not too far behind. I think you got to give a slot to the first youngster to win it, and yes, yes, yes. Chautauqua. I don't think
Ooh.
Chautauqua's highest finish in an Everest might have been fourth, at the back end of that career. But couple favourites of mine, Osborne Bulls, ran third one year and was one of my favourite Godolphin horses of all time, and I think many. Santa Ana Lane, Bivouac, and Masked Crusader. I think that rounds out my field of 11. And a winner, Kaying Rising.
Love it.
Never ran, but can't remember seeing a horse that good.
Yeah, love it. It'd be interesting, if we could have it our way and see all those horses on the track together.
Absolutely.
Now, heading overseas, it was a huge weekend. Hollie Doyle, she is just kicking goals. She has taken the outright most wins for any female rider in the UK. Now, for me, that's a huge achievement. She is the GOAT of females in racing. Does she deserve a place in our International Jockeys League that's forming? I personally was very surprised that there was no female inclusions there. Mick, I'm going to get off my female high horse for a second. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think female influence would be fantastic in a show like that. But I'm gonna I'm gonna be a bit hard on Holly. I think she's nowhere near it. And look, for those, they're only picking 12 jockeys, and for a program and for an idea to work like this, they want to be picking the best jockeys at the moment. And I feel like Jamie Carr deserves a slot over Holly Doyle. If anything, I think, you have to look at the jockey rankings. Jamie Carr's, ahead of Holly Doyle. And I think, yeah, maybe I'm being a bit biased with the being Australian, but for mine, Jamie Carr's, she's not only for mine the best female jockey in the world, she's one of the best jockeys in the world, and we saw it on the weekend. Uh, she continues to get better and better, but that takes nothing away from Holly Doyle and her achievements. It's, you know what? I think there should be, we've seen obviously the great movie, Ride Like a Girl with Michelle Payne. I think that got a great response. And I think, when we talk about, we always come back with sport now because of the success of these programs on Netflix and the likes. Um, you know, there's been chatter about, potential of a show about the females in the racing industry, female jockeys, trainers. That would work. That'd be enormous. I think that, would be a success. But in terms of, getting onto the jockey challenge, I'm going to say no for Holly Doyle.
Wow. See, I was a bit the opposite. I'm looking at it from a marketing perspective. I think, Jamie Carr is very marketable to our Australian audience. And then Rachel King, she is a Group 1 winner in Japan. She would be a definite contender for me to have her in an International Jockeys League. She always is at the International Jockeys Challenges and just, she dominates on both our local and international stage. But for me, Hollie is a clear cut, out and out yes. You look at her social media, she puts in such an effort to make her presence known. She takes you behind the scenes in everything that she does. She really, for me, is a worldwide most marketable and knowable face for females in racing. Now, obviously, I only speak for myself on that, but I think that that is a really valuable thing that they are going to lean on when they look at the International Jockeys League. Like they were saying, they want to make it a documentary series. They want to make it so that jockeys can potentially have brand campaigns off the back of this. So I think having those faces there, to me, Hollie Doyle is more marketable than Joe Moreira. And, a lot of people might disagree with me there, but, it is that recognisability that is going to make this work and resonate with young fans.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring a good point. Maybe I need to go dive into the life of Hollie Doyle a little bit more. But if I'm looking at class jockeys, I think I want to make if this is going to work, I want to make this top class jockey challenge to be something that the best of the best of the best are striving to earn their place. It's like earning your spot on the world tour for the F1. You've got to earn your
Yes.
spot and you have to get yourself into those top 10, 12 world rankings, and you need to be placing and winning the best Group 1 races in the world. And um, yeah, maybe there's, something to say for the opportunity that female jockeys might not be getting in those races, which is obviously something that's growing in this sport, the female influence. And, look, times will change for sure. But at the moment,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, like I said, I think I have to go dive into the life of Hollie Doyle more and get a bit more of a better opinion before I, reassess that.
Now, you got it absolutely right. You called it with Jack Della Maddalena's fight on the weekend. Talk me through all the news that has come off the back end of that.
Yeah, well, he definitely tunes into Racing X because he obviously heard me absolutely declare that he was going to win the belt on Sunday, and he backed it up with one of the most composed and clinical but violent, displays of mixed martial arts. Bilal Muhammad, who was the former champion, his blueprint's always very clear. It's pressure wrestling and cage control. But Jack Della Maddalena just completely dismantled that plan right from the get-go with, elite striking, his boxing. They talk about ring generalship, really controlling the ring and controlling the geography of that matchup. It was, switches of stance, it was the body shots, the teep kicks, and just the heart, that Australian heart. And, for Australian MMA this moment's seismic. It's huge. And it's, you think about the small, MMA club of Scrappy MMA in Perth where Jack Della Maddalena trains, and it's now home to a world champion. And we spoke about Oscar Piastri last week, about that kind of refreshing, that humility that Aussie athletes bring to the top stage. And Jack Della Maddalena's, he's now on top of the world, just like Oscar Piastri. And they remind me of each other, just complete humility. And I think the biggest story to come out of this fight is that the pound for pound number one fighter in the world is Islam Makhachev, and he wants the opportunity to get two belts. And Jack Della Maddalena's got that welterweight strap now, and Islam Makhachev says he's coming for it, which also means that we're going to get a fight for the ages, a chance for an Aussie fighter to be number one pound for pound. Well, probably not, but to defeat the number one pound for pound fighter in the world, but also an opportunity for a fighter to claim two belts in Perth on a pay-per-view card. So huge news on the other side of that fight. But Jack Della
Yeah.
Maddalena, he joins the likes of Robert Whittaker and Alexander Volkanovski as Australian champions. And yeah, we called it. We said it'd happen, and it did. So, Jack Della, if you see this one, I'd love to get to your next fight.
Well, it was all you that called it. I don't know about my MMA expertise, but what I do know is that there is plenty of young talent emerging in the MMA scene in Australia, as well as eyes on the sport. Do you think that this could, start to rival our footy scene over here? Are kids going to choose MMA or football when it comes to school?
Well, look, I think, enough parents these days worry too much about concussion. I think, the numbers of kids participating in sports like rugby and Aussie rules is dropping. And but look, it's the fastest. Well, I don't know if it is right now, but it was at one stage, as recent as last year, the fastest growing sport in the world. And some people can't stand the violence, and I totally get that. But I've been a fan of this sport for over 10 years now, and I've been lucky enough to get inside and see the effort, the sacrifice, and there's just the mindset of these athletes. They're going in there to kill or be killed. It's really primal. It's the oldest sport that humans have ever been involved in is combat, and yeah, I think it's a special sport. And some people look at me and laugh, but I don't care. Moments like that on the weekend, seeing Jack Della just bruised and bloodied lifting up that belt for Australia, you can't beat it.
It's pretty incredible. Hey, I can't say that, it's ever a sport that I've thought about partaking in, but it's incredible to
I'm
watch.
not a fighter. I couldn't do it. I'm first to put my hand up and say I'm not a fighter. It's not for me, but I'm happy to sit in the stands and watch these guys go to war.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what's on for the rest of your week, Mick? Anything big happening in your world?
No, it's just recovery, rest, eating lots of carbohydrates, and really starting to lock in for this race on Sunday. And look, more racing this weekend. More footy. But yeah, for me, it's about the race, and then on the other side of that, I can start to pig out a little bit more and really start to dive into the winter sporting antics here in Melbourne.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time again. Enjoy the rest of your prep.
Catch you later in the week.